Welcome to Producer Showcase. I'm Steve Poulos, filling in again for an imaginary host that seems to never be here. So welcome to the show, and I have a couple of very boring young ladies here today, as you can tell by the laughter. They're going to talk to us a little bit about something I know absolutely nothing about. I think I do, and I've found just in talking to them a few times that I really don't. And it's really an interesting whole program that they have. And I'd like to introduce Lindsay McDonough and Carissa Rubin.
Yes.
And I know Carissa, a lot of you folks out there are gonna probably recognize her as a Biddefite?
Biddeford.
From Biddeford. She grew up here.
Biddeffordian? Yeah.
I don't know, I've already ruined this show, but that's okay. But listen, I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much for having us.
The whole idea behind me having these young ladies on the show today, and I don't know, is that rude today to call somebody young lady? I hope.
I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with it. I'm at the point now where people are calling me ma'am, so I much prefer young lady.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Solved that problem, because I was worried about that, actually. I thought about that a couple of times before we even started the show. It's like, you know, some people take offense to it, I guess. But in all seriousness, I was really impressed by your studio that you have called METTA Studios, as you could tell by the shirts. And does that stand for meditation, maybe, or is it just, no?
Actually, metta in Buddhism translates to loving kindness.
Okay.
So metta for us just really means that all of our offerings, whatever it is, whether it's movement-based or therapy work, all comes from a place of loving kindness and acceptance. And everyone deserves the right to be happy and healthy and at peace.
Yeah.
And as you folks can tell, they certainly are struggling with being happy. But
it is a practice too, you know.
But seriously, I mean, I mean that genuinely. I mean, coming down to the studio, it's a great space you have there, much better than I expected. I mean, Doug Sanford, of course, who owns all, he's done a fabulous job from everywhere else that I've seen, and that spot with your finishing touches on it really is very comfortable, and so I can see why people would probably enjoy coming there. I shouldn't have thrown the probably. I'm sure they do enjoy coming there. But getting to what it is you do, basically yoga.
Yoga.
I'm always, as you know, my daughter is always on my case about that, so I finally started saying yogurt. But yoga, people my age and maybe even younger people, you tend to think of a lot of this Eastern type practices and stuff as being a lot of balaki, and actually I realize more and more now, even my traditional MDs are starting to even venture into Eastern type, medicine and stuff, and I guess this is really no exception. I mean, it's the same type of thing where, I thought I knew what I was talking about, and I thought this was just a bunch of baloney, but really, in all seriousness, it's not.
Yeah, and I think kind of, what you refer to is people have an image in their mind already of what yoga is. I can't tell you how many people are like, I can't do yoga. Because for them, the image that they might be of someone in a contortionist-like position. It's really equated to flexibility. They'll say, I'm not flexible, I can't do yoga. And then you have the opposite end where people think yoga is just sitting still and, kind of in that meditative pose with the eyes closed, and
exactly,
that's boring or whatnot. So it's so broad. There's so many different aspects to the practice. It's hard to sum up. So if somebody goes to one class, they're like, oh, yoga's not for me. That's not enough.
Yeah,
right? You need to give it a try, and there's so many different teachers and styles and approaches out there. You really have to find what I think it is resonates with you.
Yeah, yeah. And I think another thing is yoga is just an invitation and an opportunity to check in with your body, to to listen to what's actually happening. And it becomes this tool that you can use even when you're not sitting in a yoga studio on a mat. So you can really kind of tune in with what's going on in your body, what's going on in your head. And so I think if you can find the teacher in the class that speaks to you, then you start building this toolbox that you can take with you outside of the studio. And I think that's what keeps people coming back is not just that they're feeling better physically, but now there's a communication system between their brain and their body, and they kind of are like, I kind of, this feels different, or I'm feeling this way today. So it's just kind of a way to check in.
Yeah, bridging the gap.
Yeah.
You know, because really yoking is a coming together.
Right, a union.
So when you think about, you know, unifying your mind to your body. Like how many times, you know, I can think I used to be a long distance runner and I'd be out running and my thoughts would just be everywhere, but with what I was doing. So it's the whole mindfulness approach where, okay, can we still move our body, but at the same time, can we pay attention to what we're doing while we're doing it? You know, rather than being in a pose, and you are so great at this, like during class, you know, being like, notice whether or not you're bored as hell. And like, okay, when is this going to be over?
I have been known to say something like that.
Or, you know, if your mind just isn't with what you're doing. So it's a
can you
mindfulness
just
approach.
ask it to come back?
You know, it's funny because you mentioned something a second ago which reminds me of something that I say to people all the time, never thinking that there's a reason for it. And it's like when I live about 40 minutes away, and somebody said to me, gee, that's kind of a pain in the butt, you know, 35, 40 minutes every day each way. I said, yeah, but it gives me time to relax. And I'm just thinking, isn't that kind of the same thing where we're kind of alone and we're another place, just even though you're still driving and stuff,
Yeah, it's a chance to kind of check in with what's going on with you in that moment or that day, and you can let go of the things that you don't need to carry around with you.
Oh, that's a good.
And maybe you can focus on the things that bring you joy or peace or whatever it is that you're looking for that day.
And we tend to call it like unwind, and I guess
Yeah.
that means unloading.
Unloading or leaving it at the door. Yeah.
There may be hope for me yet, I think.
Yeah.
right?
So,
Hey,
It's never
nothing else
too late.
seems to be
It's never
working.
too late.
Hopefully, you know.
and that's the thing we really pride ourselves on as a studio is accessibility.
Yeah.
Is knowing that it doesn't matter what body you walk into the studio in, like the practice is for you. You know, there's no ideal type of body that is, you know, really made for this practice.
Right.
And so I think we do a good job of,
Yeah.
you know, people coming through the door and having them leave not saying, I can't do yoga or this isn't for me, but instead being like,
Wow, thank you. Or
That- I
that
just
felt
did-
good.
yeah.
Or I just did this thing that I didn't know I could do.
And it's almost like, you know, two things I thought of, like when you said that, a lot of people that I kind of equate that with the same excuse about going to a gym. I can't go into a gym because, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger's over here and, you know,
Yeah.
the beautiful girls over here in perfect condition.
Yes,
You're not,
yes.
you're not
Intimidating.
Intimidating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that's the other thing. Like we are the least intimidating place I think on
I
earth to
hope
walk
so.
into. So
Yeah, and-
that's really a big mission of ours.
It is, and we get the positive feedback from people who enter through the doors and who take a class with Carissa or I or any of our teachers. The feedback we're getting from people after their first time is everyone's so nice and welcoming, and I already felt like I belonged. And we get that because there are plenty of places where we walk into and it's intimidating and you don't feel like you belong, and there's this expectation that you just have to fall in line with everyone else. But Chris and I just can't roll that way.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I did notice that, folks. It's they have a really nice setup and they have some couches. And when we were sitting there, of course, right away the legs go. I mean, they were kind of moving in ways that I haven't been able to do since I was about 6 months old, which told me one of two things: either it actually works or you're just unusual. But I think it's Probably a
It works.
combination
It
of
works.
both.
It works.
And it's practice,
It is,
you know?
yeah.
And that's the other thing too, is when you come in, I always refer to the class as a practice.
Yep.
Like, where are you going? It's not, I'm going to yoga, I'm going to practice yoga. You know, let's not make a big deal of it. Everything, we have enough in our life that's really heavy. Like, let's not
We don't
make
have to
this
be
heavy
so
too.
serious.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're definitely pretty lighthearted.
That's good, because I guess the other part of it you talked about is not the unwinding part, but basically the same kind of thing about letting go and coming in there and meditating. I guess it'd be kind of hard for somebody to do that if you were sitting there being judgmental or saying, I mean, people all the time say, oh, geez, I can't do that. Wait a second, you're coming here to learn how to kind of do that.
Yes.
If you already knew how to do that, why would you be coming here maybe? You know?
Oh my God, it's the same
Yeah.
thing.
It is,
Like,
and I think too at METTA, we also believe in not just moving your body, and like, that there are benefits to moving your body and shifting some energy around, but the community that even our students have created in there. I mean, they all say hello to one another. If there is a new face, they introduce themselves. They welcome other people to the space,
cool.
or we facilitate that. Oh, hey, Steve, have you met Karen? Have you met Lauren? Like, all these people, you know, we know your faces and your names, so why don't you all know each other's faces and names? Because we're here together. And so there's that social aspect and being social, especially as we get older and our social groups get smaller and smaller. We need to have that community, because that's part of well-being too.
Why'd you look at me when you said that? But I'll tell you one thing, though, it's really kind of funny. And this is the honest to God truth. When I came in, it's something I think that they should fix there too, because first off, I really couldn't. I could have tripped over your area, your doorway, and I didn't notice it because of the sign. It's very. I didn't know if you were upstairs. I saw the sign. It said first floor, and then had a couple of things. And I went down the hallway, and oh, here it is. No, this can't be it. I looked in the door, and I see a bunch of people in hammocks. And I think, I didn't realize you do that. What is that all about? Is that part of, that was really cool when I got in there and saw them, all these colorful.
Yeah, so we offer aerial flow classes. You know, yoga gets a lot of, I think, the kind of glory of aerial. Most people know it as aerial yoga, but I like to think of it as aerial movement. So we use the silk hammock to support different movements of the body.
Just like using a chair or a prop or the bar on the wall.
Exactly. And so we do float and we do invert, go upside down, things that maybe for most of us we haven't done since we were kids. So it just kind of brings a whole nother level of joy to the movement practice. So it's been really, really fun. I've been teaching aerial yoga for about 5 years now. So I discovered it up in upstate New York, and I've done 2 different teacher trainings with it, and I've actually ran my own teacher training certification as well. So it's kind of where I've taken my practice to, you know, off the floor to new heights.
Well, didn't you had like a traditional kind of dance studio, didn't you, before?
So 10 years ago, I had the yoga gym in the North Dam Mill over Building 18 from 2007 to 2010. So it was strictly yoga, but yoga for people who wouldn't necessarily go into a yoga studio. My background was really grounded in fitness, and I taught for many years just in gyms and community centers and YMCAs and, you know, places that were a little more non-traditional in providing yoga classes. And so I was kind of hustling and bustling all over the place, and I was like, you know what if I just set up shop and then people come to me? And so that it was great. It was like my first little nest. And
and people here in Biddeford, when they found out Carissa was opening up another space, they were like, oh my God, finally, thank God she's back in this area. I mean, they were craving it. And so a lot of our members at METTA were followers of Carissa even before.
Right.
So they were excited to have the opportunity to practice with her again. And now you have even more trainings under your belt, and you have even more wider range of things to offer to people.
And I have to say, I was so devastated. In 2010, we got word we had to move to Albany, New York. I had to close the studio. So it was very unwilling, and I went kicking and screaming. But had it not been for that, I wouldn't have met this one here. So we actually met out in Albany when I started teaching at a gym out there. And as you were saying, it gets harder to make friends. Like the older you get, it's like just the opportunities to meet new people really starts to dwindle. And she was one of my yoga students, and I was like,
Now, when
I
you had to
like her.
work, your husband's work, was that what it was? He
Yes.
moved? And
Yeah,
had to-
he went out there for residency, and I was working from home. I was so grateful to be able to keep my full-time job that paid my bills as a paralegal, work from home, but it got really lonely and isolating, and a point, that you made about wellness being more than just your physical health, like emotionally and socially, like I was really in a dark place.
She said something in class about being a transplant, and I am not originally from Albany either. I'm from the Midwest, and it was a hard transition for me to live in Albany, and I'd been there for years. I was in grad school, and so I too was very isolated and alone. And she said something about being a transplant, and in my head I was like, we have to be best friends. I have to be best friends with this person. And so you even have our first email exchanges. We exchanged emails, we met for lunch, and then that was it. Then I would come over to her house and we'd sit on the couch, and she'd be working and I'd be working on grad school stuff. But at least we were doing it together. And then I moved up here after having a baby, and she was like, let's open a space together. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not?
And it didn't take much convincing.
It didn't take much convincing.
But I think we were both in a place. She had come over one day, and I was in a position I was just not feeling really happy with where I had landed. And you were saying something about how you were unhappy at your job, and I was like, you know what? Why don't we just do this? And then she was like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, okay. And I was like, whoa, okay. Literally the next day, we saw space. A week later, we said yes.
Release. Or yeah, I guess it took a while, yeah.
I mean, it just all happened so fast, but I think it's really been in the works this whole time,
Yeah.
So.
And hey, you belong here. You're from here.
Yes.
For me, I'm always, because like you, I don't live here anymore. I'm in Falmouth, I have a little bit of a drive. People say the same thing, they're like, oh my gosh, you make that drive, it's so far. But I'm like, honestly, for me to get to Biddeford from where I am, it takes me longer to get downtown Portland.
Yeah.
And Biddeford is like, it's just, for me, it's home.
Yeah.
Right.
This is like where my roots have always been. And even when I was in Albany, even when I was living in New Hampshire, I was always
here all the
coming back
time,
here.
yeah.
Not Portland, they have enough. They have enough there. So it was time to really like come back.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And then I moved to Biddeford. So now one of
Oh,
us
she's
at
living in
least
my
lives-
hometown.
Yeah.
She gets the
that.
beach
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah.
It's funny though, because I hadn't seen you in years, and when I saw you, I said, oh my God, she hasn't changed. I mean, I knew you when
Little more smile lines.
Holy cow, I didn't see any of that. I don't know. It's amazing. So like, something you guys must be doing that's right.
Yoga
Oh, yeah.
and water? I don't know. Yeah.
Water helps, I guess.
Water?
But that's
Yeah.
the thing too, is like, because, I think a lot of people associate yoga with me just because I've been doing it for a while and having had the yoga gym. But so people are like, oh, you opened a yoga studio. And it's like, well, we're a studio that offers yoga, but we're much more than that. So as much as, METTA having the translation of loving kindness, for us it also became an acronym of sorts.
Yes.
So M is movement. So we have an umbrella of movement classes. We have the aerial flow classes with the hammock. We have bar classes. I'm super passionate about functional movement. So I teach a program called Balance Athlete. We have Hatha yoga. We have slow vinyasa yoga. We have prenatal yoga. We have toddler classes, like so much movement. The E for us is energy. So we believe very strongly in energetics. We have Reiki practitioners. I'm a massage therapist.
We have a sound healer come
We have
in
sound
every
healing.
so often.
Yeah. T therapy. We have the massage therapy, and we'll be offering physical therapy will be in the space as well. T is teacher trainings. We just got certified as a registered yoga school. So we'll be
really
offering,
exciting.
so we'll be offering our first 200-hour yoga teacher training in the fall.
And then my background is in education, and so I will be offering a lot of supportive services and educational workshops.
Wow.
As a doula for the birth world, so
And see, and
prenatal
I
and postpartum.
I was pretty proud of myself. I knew what that was because, as you know, I think
Yay!
I told you, my daughter Shannon said
Yes.
she's a doula, and I said she looked at me like I was going to say woof, and I said, "Oh wow, that's cool." You know, I knew exactly what it was. So.
Yeah, so it's just it's a combination of my background. Unlike Carissa's, was not in physical fitness. I did the traditional yoga teacher training in a very traditional style, and the way that I learned is very traditional sequences. And then my education is in education. So I'm blending all that together to hopefully, bring
That's
that
fabulous.
to people as well.
And I have to say, my wife is, in talking to her about your facility, she's always been involved in, traditional medicine and everything with a lot of, pretty well-known doctors, plastic surgeons, and even years ago with a chiropractor doctor that was, I guess, really good. And so she really believes in yoga and stuff. And Shannon started going to classes and learning how to do that. And she kept telling me, boy, I see a huge difference in a lot of, as we all have devils kind of on our back and, and a lot of it was being lived. She could see that. And I was like, yeah, I guess I can see a difference. So I know that this kind of stuff works.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, you mentioned balance. Is this something like, because we've had people years ago, we've been doing this, 17 years or so at least, I've been involved with it. And we've had people on a lot of different traditional stuff, but we've had people on about balance, teaching balance to seniors that have strengthened them up so they're not falling and stuff. Do you see yoga as helpful in that area too, as far as?
Absolutely. So one of the A of METTA is for action. And so just a small example of that, we were invited to St. Andre's in Biddeford to teach a chair yoga class. And so it's for people who don't have as much mobility to make it to the studio necessarily. And you can work on a lot of stability and stabilizing muscles even when you're sitting in a chair.
Well, as a matter of fact, you guys showed me something, and I want Steve to get a two-shot of them, and Pat, and you showed me something called hovering or something. And it's like, if I tried that, they'd be calling the ambulance right now.
But it's also called integration. So
Yeah.
you can learn that by coming to Balance Athlete.
Yes.
Wow.
And learning which muscles you need to activate to make yourself float.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
But we have the benefit. This is kind of handy with the benefit of the
Yeah,
handles. This
totally.
is kind of like cheating.
And actually, some of the things you described to me and everything, that's nothing compared to what you're able to do and stuff.
But it's practice, and you just,
yeah.
I think you just have to have fun with it.
And I think it is, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's good to point out that Hatha Yoga, which is what Lindsay specializes in, one of her specialties in teaching, is really like, people are like, well, what is Hatha Yoga? Like, Hatha Yoga is really just the umbrella term that encompasses all of the physical asana or movement practice. So with Hatha Yoga, it's very gentle, but in a way, I don't say gentle in the sense that you're not working, right? Not like restorative, but gentle in the sense that it really tailors the practice to your individual body type. So there will be chairs if necessary. There are tons of props and supports.
We go to the wall, we go to the bar, we use all sorts of things. And there's the great thing about Hatha is that we don't have to connect each breath with one movement like a vinyasa class. So we take the time to set up these poses so you can really feel it. And I provide a lot of options for people like, well, how does it feel to do it this way? And now try it this way, and how does that feel? And so, again, going back to the first thing we talked about was just noticing what's happening in your body and having that conversation between brain and body.
It's
Yeah, so
amazing.
super
Yeah.
senior friendly, but
Yes.
just where you were talking about as seniors, how can we age more gracefully? You know, I mean, I know, I'm 40, but I feel
but
the
you
effects
feel
of
it.
aging.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one of those things, which is why, because I wasn't practicing the same way in my 20s.
Right.
My 20s, it was like power vinyasa, go, hot, sweat, move, the faster the better. And now I'm just like, oh, whoa. Now I want to know like how my body is actually moving.
The mechanics of it. How is this
yeah.
happening?
And,
Yeah.
and when you said aging gracefully, for a minute there I was thinking I wasn't even born gracefully. but keeping that in mind, is it possible for somebody to be with this type of practice and classes and stuff to maybe be 40, 50, 60, whatever, never having done anything?
Yes.
Those are our
Yes,
people.
that
to us.
come. Yes,
Yes.
So
we
you
love
so it's
that.
not like it's too late at all, right?
No, it's like you might find yourself enjoying your body and the aging process.
And instead of being like a lot of people who maybe were very active and physically fit, as you start to decline, obviously with age, you're going on the upscale. They're kind of coming down. You've never been to that peak before, maybe, and now you feel better than you ever have, I guess, in your
Yes.
life. Not
Yeah.
me, of course. I haven't got that point yet, but maybe-
Yet.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
Yes.
What when you first talked about the bar the other day, I was about bar classes, and I'm thinking, well, I have kids that are bartenders, and I don't know anything about mixed drinks. Maybe that would be, but of course,
It's BARRE.
okay.
Yes.
And that you explained was actually.
Yeah,
a
so
I'm
term
going to let Carissa explain this because
So with bar, you're working a lot of your postural muscles, a lot of the stabilization muscles of the body, very small movements. Bar is the ballet bar. It's just the term. So we use the bar to support using it for balance and things like, thigh work positions, maybe some traditional dance warm-ups and movements. But it's not super easy always,
Yeah.
like with anything, you kind of make it what you want, but people will come in and be like, oh, I'm going to do some light stretching at the bar. And then it's kind of like beady music, and then you're like holding planks, and then, you're using these 2-pound weights that you're like, oh, 2 pounds, big deal. And then you're like, oh, 2 pounds, big deal, right? So it's really a total body workout.
Yeah.
So it works a lot of core. We're doing thigh work, we're doing back strengthening, we're doing arm strengthening, but it's all a lot of teeny tiny movements, really intentional movements.
Now, the other thing you talked about mind, body, and all that, and I didn't mean it negatively when I said all that stuff. I'm not saying it, I really do, I have to admit, I didn't think much about it before, but even talking to you, I see that it makes sense. But the other thing is, we're talking basically, I was mentioning people with maybe physical limitations
Yeah.
that can be improved. But because of that connection, is there somebody that maybe has depression for some reason? Not necessarily, I mean, there are obviously chemical
Sure.
imbalances and stuff that require more of an intervention, but people that could be a little bit depressed about something, does that benefit them
anger,
to do?
depression,
Absolutely.
anxiety,
Frustration, I mean,
Yeah.
basically anything, I guess.
anything really. Again, going back to the tool of the breath. So especially in Hatha class, I think we play around with different types of breath work. And, there is something to be said in traditional yoga. Certain postures help alleviate certain emotional states that we all experience as humans. And so you can design a whole class around anxiety or depression, or, even just getting upside down, right? A literal shift in your perspective can also help you shift your perspective. So being upside down for a couple minutes a day, which isn't always, accessible for everyone. But yeah, absolutely. Yoga definitely can help with our emotional state. because we start listening to what's happening.
I tell you, it's kind of depressing in a way, and I'll tell you why. And I'm serious, but not about anything that you're talking about necessarily, except for the fact that, for years, people, you're kind of taught the answer to everything is a pill.
Yeah.
Or, let's have the surgery, we'll give them a lobotomy. It didn't work on me anyway. But, I didn't. But the truth of the matter is that there's a lot more than we know or necessarily understand. We need to give things a try before we judge.
I think what I really love about yoga is that it's an opportunity to create some space. And the whole philosophy behind yoga allows you to do that. And so you're asking yourself about, how does this feel? And maybe emotions start coming up when you're in these poses. And then for the teacher to say, know that it's totally okay for you to start feeling angry or anxious or whatever it is. It happens for a lot of people. You might ride a wave of emotions when you're in a certain posture because we hold a lot of tension in our hips and all of a sudden things start bubbling up and you're like, where is this coming from? But it's normal. And just to have someone say that experience happens to a lot of people already makes you feel better because now you're not the only one. And then giving yourself permission to have those feelings and thoughts can go a long way for then being able to walk away from them. Even if they're still back there, you can just walk away from them for a little bit of time and you start creating that separation and then you have some space to just breathe. It's, right? I hope that made sense.
Think about for the most part, how fast we're all moving through life, how stimulated we all are at any given time, that, we don't really give ourselves time to feel. Or if we are feeling something, it's uncomfortable. So how can I fix it? Fast.
Yes.
We're all used to instant gratification, wanting things immediately. So I think being able to take the time to practice and give yourself that space to practice, and maybe not just jump to the quick fix, it could definitely help.
So even people, kids especially, I guess, that have had some kind of traumatic event, it's helpful to do.
Yeah, there's a lot of research right now and movements in the yoga world for trauma-sensitive yoga. Even just choosing the words really mindfully and doing the best you can to stay away from possibly using trigger words to kind of send that person back into that traumatic state. Simple things like even not just calling it a pose. We don't call it a yoga pose. You're taking a shape or a form or a posture. So yes, there's a lot of research that goes into anyone who's experienced trauma, to whatever degree that is. Practicing yoga can really help. As part of there are other things that are involved too.
Sure.
Therapy or maybe medication or whatever. Yeah.
I'm simplifying it, and I realize, but it's still a tool.
A tool.
It's a tool.
It's one tool that most of us overlook.
Yeah.
And we all say the same thing, oh, geez, I wish I didn't have to take those pills. Well, sometimes maybe you can't cut out all of it, but even if it's like blood pressure, maybe you can cut it in half by, they want you to
what are your
exercise.
options? And that's why it's great to hear you saying that, your MD is now hey, why don't you go try acupuncture? Why don't you,
She is fabulous.
That's really
I always assumed she was like a DO because she was offering some of these. I had these other thoughts that, my old doctors never would have ever mentioned, So it's amazing, but it just goes to show you there's more to it than what we were taught or what we were made to understand or open to. I guess that was the big thing. We just weren't. It was like, no, that can't be real.
things are shifting, I think definitely, there's so much more of this stuff now than when I first started teaching, yoga in early 2000. There really wasn't